family of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins, who was shot and killed on the set of the movie Rust, is suing Alec Baldwin and the film's producers for wrongful death. Let's watch.
And the lawsuit, as you can see, names Alec Baldwin and others who were responsible for the safety on the set and whose reckless behavior and cost-cutting led to the senseless and tragic death of Halyna Hutchins. There are regulations and guidelines in place today that should prevent something like this from happening, but they need to be enforced. And had they been followed, this never would have happened. This is so rare that somebody would be shot on a scene when they're lensing it. There's nothing, there's no supposed to be live ammunition. It never should have happened. Never.
The family's attorneys went on to say that Baldwin refused training for the type of cross-draw he was performing when the actor fired the shot that killed her. Baldwin's attorney responded that any claim the actor was reckless is entirely false.
Following the tragic incident, reports revealed there were many red flags on set over safe working conditions. The Los Angeles Times reports there were 3 previous misfires from the prop gun. Workers also reportedly walked off set and were concerned about COVID safety protocols. Host of the BadFaith Podcast and former National Press Secretary for the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign, Briahna Joy Gray, joins us now to discuss. Welcome.
Thank you, Ryan.
And Briahna, I feel like, accident or not, there's some sense of justice here that suggests that Baldwin should really pay up. I mean, where do you come down on this?
Yeah, so first of all, in the popular imagination, it might seem like he was just an actor, but it's, we should stress that he was an executive producer of this, right? So to the extent that there were kind of checks and balances in place that would have prevented something like this have happened, that he had oversight responsibility for, then that would ultimately fall on him as well. Moreover, the fact that there were 3 other discharges on the set and that a colleague had emailed their concern about there having been so many misfires on the set previously really indicates that there was knowledge beforehand that there was some lapse in guidelines that wasn't subsequently followed up on. And from a legal perspective, if there were a protocol in place, if there were safety protocols that Alec Baldwin and the production staff followed, it could be exculpatory if some other kind of unforeseen event happened that caused this, the shooting and death to occur. But, and we'll see if any facts bear that out, but what we know so far suggests otherwise. What we know so far suggests that this was not something that was supposed to happen, though the armorer, as it were, the person who's supposed to be responsible for the guns and making sure there is no live ammunition in them, obviously at some point missed the mark, and now a woman is dead.
Yeah, when last I checked in on this story, the conversation was really focused on this arms master and this young woman or younger woman's kind of alleged inexperience with weaponry, previous incidents. I mean, I think many of us are just perhaps naively like, how is it possible the gun was loaded with and maybe it has to be. I don't know, but mere fact of it is kind of baffling to us.
Yeah, well, live ammunition apparently doesn't mean that there's literally a bullet necessarily. It also is what is the words that are used to refer to blanks as well, right, which can have a harmful effect. But right, regardless, the point of the matter is the gun, before the gun was used in the scene, the indication that it was shouted out on set that it was safe to use. It was shouted out on set that it was, a safe gun. So it is curious to me what these allegations that Alec Baldwin wasn't trained properly ultimately amount to. If at the end of the day, training isn't dispositive to whether or not there was an object in the gun that could have caused harm to people. And it's also important, you mentioned the kind of labor issues that were ongoing. This was a low-budget film that was being run by a low-budget company that had stepped in and filled the voids that had emerged among COVID. And moreover, there had been not just staffing concerns, labor concerns that you mentioned earlier, but there were complaints from the staff who were being asked to drive 50 miles from a neighboring town because they were concerned that at the end of a long 11, 12-hour day, it was unsafe for them to drive home. That had caused a number of camera operators to walk off of the set earlier and be replaced by non-union labor. And so so it really does feel like a conflation. The implication seems to be like a conflation of all of these behaviors. A lack of properly paying people, a lack of looking out for people's safety seems to have led up to this tragedy.
It sounds awful. Like, the most damning thing to me is these previous misfires that had happened just kind of days earlier. And it would strike me that if you're on a movie set and somebody accidentally fires a live round and nobody gets hurt, which is what happened the first couple times, that you would shut everything down and you would ask yourself, first of all, you would thank everything that's holy that nobody got hurt, and then you would sit down and you would try to figure out what in the process failed that allowed these live bullets to come flying out of this weapon so that it didn't happen again. And according to the crew, reports in the press from the crew, that didn't happen. They just, well, glad nobody got hurt. We'll just move on. And so does that rise to the liability of, significant liability?
Yeah, that's the profit motive for you. What you just described happening in an ideal world is what would happen in a world where movie sets are extremely expensive. Hiring people for the day to run all of the various component parts that it takes to make a movie is very expensive. Leasing equipment, having set permits, all of these other kinds of things are very expensive. And so when you are looking down the barrel of these additional costs in a context that was already supposed to be a low budget film, people are going to start cutting corners. And that's, not to make everything about kind of leftism, but this is what people are talking about when we're talking about what happens when you have only one incentive structure that's motivating everybody's behavior. And human life is never the priority.
Yeah, and I just looked it up. So this armorer, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, she's also being named in this same lawsuit. Alec Baldwin appeared in a special with George Stephanopoulos saying he was not responsible for Helena Hutchins' death. Let's watch.
Your emotions are so clearly so right there on the surface. You felt shock. You felt anger. You felt sadness. Do you feel guilt?
No. I feel that there is. I feel that someone is responsible for what happened, and I can't say who that is, but I know it's not me.
Baldwin now awaiting the outcome of the sheriff's investigation, hoping whatever it uncovers helps to ensure a tragedy like this never happens again.
What do we come out of this learning? What do we come out of it? What changes can be made? Because where you have a person where, as I said, this is 1 in a billion, that someone puts a real bullet in the gun. That never happens. And the idea that a real bullet was in that gun and would come out of that gun and kill that woman, that was not even in the realm of possibility. And that's the thing that they must find out, is who brought bullets onto the set.
I think it's pretty incredible that he says he doesn't feel any guilt. Like, even if he didn't do anything wrong, if I shot someone and it was totally not my fault, absolutely victim of circumstance, I would still feel guilty, I think.
Right, if somebody runs out in front of you and you hit them with your car.
Absolutely.
You feel terrible.
You're in therapy.
Even if you had nothing, even if there was absolutely nothing.
Maybe he has to say he doesn't feel guilt for liability, because it'll be cited in this lawsuit.
Yeah. It feels like it might be a legal instruction. It feels like it might be a therapeutic instruction to help him wrestle with what is a really difficult thing to wrestle with, that
right.
Wittingly or not, he shot somebody and they died, and she was a mother and a wife and had a family, and that's something I'm sure that he has to struggle with. But look, ultimately he is right. Legally, if there's a kind of chain of causation that would ordinarily have led to him but was interrupted by someone doing something nefarious for reasons outside of anybody's awareness or control, like sneak a bullet into the gun, well, then obviously that interrupts his the chain of responsibility that leads back to Alec Baldwin as executive producer. And so it will be interesting to see what this lawsuit ultimately finds, because what it seems from the charges is that they don't believe anything like that has taken place. They're suing Alec Baldwin and the armorer.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's saying it's 1 in a billion. We got to find out how a live bullet got into that gun. Right. The first time that it
3 in a
happened.
billion.
Right.
It's 3 in a billion.
Right. First time would be a good time
3 in
to
a
do that. Briahna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.